All right, Scott Bernstein is president and founder since 1978 of CNT, the Center for Neighborhood Technology, which received the MacArthur Award for Creative and Effective Organizations. He served on White House Commission, studied at Northwestern University, helped create the Brookings Metro Center, taught at UCLA, board member of CNU, listed in Plan Edison's 100 top urban thinkers, and received Lifetime Achievement Awards from USDOE and from ASLA. CNT created the Housing plus Transportation Affordability Index, the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit, helped communities get paid for their energy demand reduction, created the Green Infrastructure Portfolio Standard for cities and regions, prepared Chicago Climate Action Plan, and an accompanying manual, all in use in the largest U.S. cities and regions. And so in 7 minutes, we're going to get all of Scott Bernstein's knowledge. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. You forgot to mention the most important thing. At CNT, we believe the future's so bright you got to wear shades, and that's why I've been walking around with this stuff. So I want to talk about two things. One is to relate green infrastructure approaches to resilience, and I want to spend most of my time talking about some next-gen approaches that might get us to scale with what's been talked about as an excellent set of demonstration projects. So this stuff's got to work. We don't have forever to deal with climate change and flooding. So where are the arrows here? There we go. So there's been a lot of definitions of resilience around, but I really like this one that we found, which defines resilience as a process that it relates to community, and at the community level it emerges from sets of adaptive capacities such as economic development, social capital, information and communication, and community competence, which all stem from collective efficacy and empowerment. That's a great definition, and I don't think it diminishes the power of that definition to tell you that the source is the Community Resilience Committee of the American Psychological Association of America. But I think it's really quite true that these are things that we've been experimenting with mostly at the scale of parcels and households and so forth. We've seen some emerging demonstrations just today in the presentations of what it takes to take it to the block or the court or the community scale. And yet we don't have the tools in place the way we do yet, say, for taking energy efficiency to a community scale, or transit and transit-oriented development to a community and a regional scale. And how do we do that? One reason we should do it is that climate change is well underway and has been for some time. This is 83 years of monitored weather data from Midway Airport, and it's interesting. You can do this anywhere in the country if you learn how to read rain gauges and interpret them. Paul's compulsive. He'll teach you for a fee, probably, maybe even for free. But anyway, we've seen that the number of annual heating degree days has dropped fairly predictably during this period, and the number of cooling degree days has increased. So it actually is a warmer Chicago than it used to be. And correlated one-to-one with that is the trend on the average increase in rainfall and the average increase in snowfall. So climate change has disturbed conditions such that the amount of water that's available is higher, so it's a warmer and a wetter world. And at the same time, of course, we've been sprawling, and while the annual increase in land consumption was about 1.83% from 1960 to 90, and that slowed down to 1.46 in the succeeding 15 years, we're still spreading out and disturbing the condition of permeability that might otherwise allow us to deal with this. So when we looked at the question of land cover as part of a big group grab of data, 100 agencies and I don't know how many coalitions pooled their resources in a project that CNT did with the Open Lands Project and covered it, we tried to estimate whether in fact we had the permeability necessary to handle the rainfall that we've got, and the answer was we were losing it. More recently, the Forest Service verified that with a study of 18 cities showing that we've been losing grass and herb, tree and shrub cover while gaining buildings, roads, and other impervious surfaces. I would commend you to look at this data, and if the Forest Service hasn't included your city, this was a very powerful graph for the board of the Chicago Community Trust that I presented a couple months ago. Chicago civic leaders don't normally look at this kind of information. So one thing that makes us, that really I think hit home, that speaks to every presentation we've had, is that flood risk is usually assumed to be highest in floodplains. We worked with the two largest insurers in Chicago and FEMA and got actual claims data for 5 years. And what we showed was that the floodplain absolutely was not a good predictor of where flooding occurred. It was more likely to occur in areas where there was impervious surfaces, period. And this may have been what got the Farmers Insurance Company to file lawsuits against all local governments recently in Chicago for failure to take action. Novel claim, they said, weather may be an act of God, but flood damages aren't preordained. And unfortunately, we threw that lawsuit yesterday, but they said we made our point. Thank you. But the Green Infrastructure Portfolio Standard that Paul mentioned is something we created that's being tested out in Grand Rapids and Milwaukee. The idea is like a renewable energy portfolio standard. You set a long-term goal, but you commit accountably with reporting to quarterly and annual goals for your implementation of what you're doing. So it's a simple way to get accountability if you're demanding change from the outside. And there's a handbook on that one. That's one next-gen strategy. I'm almost done here, Paul. The second one is something that was jokingly called in my office, and we'll still have to come up with a better name, the Wet Weather Retrofitting or Wetrofit program. And it's bad enough you got to put up with PowerPoint, but then bumper stickers like that. So we run very large energy efficiency one-stop retrofit programs that bring together energy audits, contracting, and money, financing, so that people can afford to actually retrofit existing homes and buildings. For example, in the last 5 years, our multifamily program, we've actually completed roughly 20,000 units of retrofit in multifamily buildings and have another 30,000 in the pipeline. And the power of these programs, just, you know, to actually take existing property owners and make it easy for them to put the information and the contractors and the money together, is something we don't have yet for green infrastructure. So we give people this information, we do the demo programs, and then everybody goes out and almost nobody can get the information. And the contractors don't hang out shingles that say they do green infrastructure, and the banks forget it. So we're replicating, and we will be in business by this fall with, in fact, a one-stop retrofit program. So stay tuned at www.cnt.org. We think this one will be replicable too. The financing will come from foundations, we think insurers, we're negotiating with them now, and cities, and we're going to partner with our existing energy program, so we think that will help us speed up the rate of implementation here. This will be a challenge. In Portland, we were asked to address the question, how do we help replace the tree canopy with these approaches? And we had a clue from a study in Philadelphia that showed the increase in property value from reforestation. And what we proposed doing was tree increment financing, the equivalent of tax increment financing on this value. We think it'll be adopted this year. The question came up, how do you deal with communities and the aftermath of flooding, and using standard group gathering techniques with whiteboards, we asked victims to come together and tell their story and to confront the agencies that said green infrastructure isn't ready. That has been very effective. That is a low-cost approach to getting this done. And finally, the big question that Paul alluded to, can you make the case this stuff pays instead of costs? So we're working on applying the techniques that we helped invent for making that case for transportation efficiency and for energy efficiency to green infrastructure. So thank you very much.
Thank you.